The all-new, fully redesigned M4 Mac Mini is worth nothing. Seriously, that's what Apple thinks it's worth. Because check this out, if you take the base model Mac Mini with its 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gig SSD and double those capacities, so 32 gigabytes of memory and 512 gigabytes of storage, changing nothing else, the price of the machine swells from $599 to a whopping $1,199. Yep, that is right, your brain has not deceived you. For $1 less, $1,198, you could get two base model Mac Minis with the same combined memory and storage as a single upgraded one. So Apple is basically saying that that entire second Mac Mini, with its M4 SoC, Thunderbolt 4 controllers, networking, power supply, case cooling assembly, all of that is worth negative 50 cents. Correctamundo, Apple values it at less than nothing. Now, on the face of things, this is insane, and yet it's not quite as simple as "Herder, Apple fanboy, dumb, Mac always expensive." Because you see, well, I've yet to do much more than take my unit apart, and yes, I was able to put it back together. It works great. I don't know why everybody thought I couldn't do that. Anyway, these benchmark numbers, they speak for themselves. For $600, you cannot get a better deal in the entirety of computing. Seriously, forget this tiny new sub 1 liter case. Forget the mere watts of power that it sips from the wall. Objectively speaking, you cannot build a PC of any size that outperforms this machine for $600 using new parts, period. And I'm going to prove that to you. I spent a lot of time on PC Part Picker playing around with a bunch of different build configurations, trying to save money wherever possible while maximizing performance, aesthetics be damned. And, well, I came up with a build fairly similar to Luke's from the WAN show a few weeks ago. It all begins with a Ryzen 7600X CPU, a chip that is a generation old, yes, but a chip that's within single-digit performance of its replacement, and at a much lower cost. I mean, I got this thing for just $210. It is a single-core powerhouse that might just beat the M4 in multi-core performance, thanks to AMD's 6 equal cores that support simultaneous multi-threading, a stark contrast to the M4's mere 4 performance cores. Now, as we move on to the second component, yeah, you can already see my first major sign of cost-cutting. The motherboard. Look, there is just no way, no how to get the same 3 Thunderbolt 4 rated ports that the Mac Mini has. Not to mention the other 2 full-speed USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gigabits per second ports that the Mac Mini's got up front. I mean, the closest board that I could find without spending my entire budget on just one component was ASUS's $150 Prime B650 motherboard. Now, this board itself doesn't offer Thunderbolt, but it is the cheapest one with a header to support an additional $115 Thunderbolt EX4 add-in card. But even then, I'm just stuck with 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, not 3. Now, I can already hear the PC boys clacking away on their speed silver keep switches saying, "Oh, no Thunderbolt 4, who cares? The Thunderbolt 4 is only for the Cupertino cultists." That may be true, but just because you don't know how to swim doesn't mean that swimming pools are worthless. Not to mention, it even further weakens the PC value argument because, consider it useful or not, Apple did spend a non-insignificant amount of money implementing it. But fine. I too will, for the purposes of this video, pretend that Thunderbolt 4 doesn't exist and that nobody uses it, and I will instead purchase this bargain bin motherboard from ASRock with only one single, measly 5 gigabits per second USB-C port and 3 USB-A ports of the same transport. And thank goodness there is Ethernet on board because, well, we do not get Wi-Fi nor Bluetooth on a PCB this cheap. The rest of the components, they're about as inexpensive as I could get without sacrificing performance. There's 16 gigabytes of 5600 megahertz bareboard Crucial DDR5 RAM. Not very attractive, but very quick. We've got a massive 256 gigabyte SSD to match Apple's. $17 Thermal Assassin CPU cooler, since one doesn't come with the Ryzen 7600X, and the chintziest power supply that EVGA is brave enough to put their name on. Truly, this thing is awful. Oh, and a case. We don't have money for a case, so a cheapo test bench it is. No, I didn't forget about a GPU. Okay, see, Apple Silicon's greatest weakness has always been graphics performance, but look at the budget, bud. We don't have the money. There's no wiggle room for some fancy pants 4060. In fact, we don't even have money for something old and respectable like an AMD RX 6600. We are just going to have to settle for what is most certainly the worst GPU that you can currently buy, the NVIDIA 3050 with 6 gigabytes of VRAM. This thing is garbage and should be purchased by absolutely nobody. Luckily for NVIDIA, All they have to do is compete with internal graphics on Apple's base model chip, so surely they'll be able to swing that, right? Right? With the machine fully assembled, $40 over budget, and looking uglier than your search history, well, it's time to pit it against Apple's half of a Steam Deck sized desktop. And things are, oh boy, things are not looking so good for our hobbled together scrap heap. The CPU comes out swinging, attempting to hold its own in Geekbench and Cinebench, and frankly, it gets somewhat close to the M4 in multi-core performance, but still not quite pulling it off. As for single-core performance, well, it is like consistently 25 to 40% worse. It is just flat out slower. But how about that GPU? Because we've got a full card here. Well, it's relative and somewhat difficult to compare, given that the M4 utilizes the Metal Graphics API and the PC is using a combination of OpenGL, DirectX, and Vulkan. In the synthetic benchmarks that we did run, the PC actually held its own quite well. And that lead continues into the real world, with the PC generally coming out on top in most games, though the Neural Engine on the Mac just frankly obliterates the PC's NPU-less hardware. Yeah, on the whole, it's just, it's frankly not close. And that's just the raw performance data. I mean, let's not forget the size and power consumption differences. Under 100% load, our PC is pulling 300 watts from the wall, whereas the Mac Mini is sipping just about 40 to 50 under max load. Like I said earlier, you cannot build a faster computer for $600 at any size or any efficiency of the Mac Mini. But don't gloat yet, Mac Daddies, because the second, and I mean the second, that you click on any single upgrade option, the value proposition of this entire machine becomes null and void because Apple's upgrade pricing has morphed from exorbitant to absolutely insane. And there are nincompoops out there that are thinking, what are you talking about? It has always been this way. This isn't new. Wrong. Let's go on to the Internet Archive, shall we? Back to 2018, because 2018 saw the first major Mac Mini refresh in years. This was the first Mini to gain an SSD. Yes, it was absolutely the last Mac in the lineup to gain an SSD. Apple forgot about the Mini for a long time. But okay, 2018. How much do you think it cost to upgrade from, I don't know, 16 to 32 gigs of RAM? Oh, $400. Wait, $400? That's literally exactly the same that it costs to upgrade today. Well, what about the SSD? Because SSDs have gotten really cheap over the years. Oh, yeah, no, those upgrade prices are identical too. This was 6 years ago. But you think that's bad? Oh, buddy, buckle up. How about we go back to the 2015 MacBook Pro? 2015! This is before USB-C, before AirPods. Barack Obama is president, and we are arguing on the internet whether the dress is black and blue or gold and white. It's black and blue, by the way. The upgrade pricing for the same jump in capacity on both memory and storage is identical to today. But it gets even worse. Enter the 2012 MacBook Pro. This was Apple's first laptop with a Retina high-resolution display, their first computer with USB 3.0, and the first MacBook Pro with no DVD drive. This is 2012, Coney 2012, remember that? Gangnam Style is #1 on the charts. The first Hunger Games movie is in theaters and Instagram photos look like this, 2012. And what does it cost to go from a 256 gig SSD to a 512 gig SSD? Oh, $300. Well, that's more expensive than it is today, except for, wait a minute, that also includes a processor upgrade. Back then, you might be wondering, was $300 for an SSD capacity increase of this caliber a scam? No! There was better margin options out there at consumer retail, but Apple's upgrade prices were reasonable. Today, they are not reasonable. They're not remotely reasonable. And I know that there are Apple fans out there that are delusional enough to somehow believe that Apple's component selection is better than what you can get on a PC, and that's why it's more expensive. No, dingbats! Wake up and smell the roses! The 2 terabyte NAND flash in the M3 Max MacBook Pro is more than twice as slow as leading PCIe 5 SSDs. And guess what? They're replaceable! They're upgradable! And what do they cost? Literally a fraction of what Apple charges for a single upgrade with better performance and reliability. Now, I could maybe forgive upgrade pricing for memory. Because to Apple's credit, it is on package and it is unified. It's shared between the SoC's co-processors, the CPU, the GPU, the neural engine, etc. But guess what? So is the Snapdragon X Elite's memory found in ARM laptops across many different PC OEMs. Lenovo is one such example, and what do they charge? Oh, less money than Apple for twice as much memory. I will say this. 16 gigabytes as a new base memory option for Macs is enough for most casual users. 8 gigabytes was absolutely not. And while this change is likely driven more by Apple's AI ambitions than sheer generosity, it is still a welcome improvement. What surprised me is that not only did Apple bring this to computers that did not see an update like the M3 MacBook Air, but they even brought 16 gigs of memory as the base option to pseudo-discontinued models like the $999 M2 MacBook Air. That honestly is shocking and truly great. But that is where my praise stops, because the base storage is still stuck at 256 gigabytes. And I'm sorry, but that is not okay, even for people who live mostly in the cloud. Once you have the OS and just a handful of third-party apps installed, you're out of space. And so the only people that are buying this abysmally low configuration are the people that don't know any better, and they don't understand the problem when they run into it. They come into the Genius Bar because their computer has become inexplicably glacially slow. They don't know why. They waste skilled labor hours from the Genius Bar, and all the Genius Bar can tell them is, sorry. You probably didn't know this when you bought the computer, but you cheaped out. And oh yeah, there's no fix because the storage is literally soldered onto the PCB. Or in the case of the Mac Mini, keyed, but proprietary and not part of any upgrade program. It is literally a garbage experience for everybody involved. And it is hypocritical as all get out for a company that brags about its push for complete carbon neutrality by the end of the decade. There is a reason that no other PC OEM in the industry is retaining 256 gig SSDs as the entry configuration, and Apple should not either. Oh, no, actually, wait, there is one. It's Microsoft. So great job, Apple. You're no better than Microsoft. Upgrade the stalwart Mac Mini to 32 gigs of memory and a 2 terabyte SSD, and you find yourself staring down the barrel of an $1,800 price shotgun. And for that amount of money, well, the Mac Mini is only still mini in size, ready to be obliterated by similarly priced PCs. Throw in an RTX 4070 Ti Super, throw in the top CPU on the market, and it is game over. Apple, Apple, only you can end this madness. Do what is right for your customer, what is right for the planet, and find other ways to return value to shareholders, because us consumers, we're not going to tolerate this for much longer. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, stay snazzy. Now get this piece of crap out of my face.